if you want to sustain, you have to have a fanatical discipline and face the ruthless facts about your business. And this would be one of them potentially, is that making that choice or working with that larger client is actually not good for the business. If we hadn't scaled, if we hadn't gotten more and more looks, right, in different markets with different, strategies built up with different clients, our value proposition wouldn't be what it is today.
Welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Okay. Today, Reid, we were talking about agencies, because that's our world, but we'll say it could be service businesses and why they don't typically scale. So we haven't had a lot of time to prep for this, but I just thought it'd be good for us to riff on and say what makes it challenging. And one way that I guess we could demonstrate that this is challenging in multifamily is we don't have the total. We have our best guesses for the size of the different agencies in multifamily, but it's very fragmented. So even folks that have been in the space for a while, they'll know like the G5s or Reach Local or Apartment SEO or Digible or whoever, right? But or Lease Labs back in the day, those companies, as best we could ever figure, never obtained more than like 3% of the total spend in the market. They may have had good chunk of websites. Like I think Lease Labs had said at one point they had like 5,000 or 6,000 websites, I think was in one of their press releases. And who knows, like the way it was phrased was like, is that really websites or was that other things? And same with G5. I think when they got bought, it was something like somewhere between like 7,000 and 9,000 is what I remember in the press release. And as like customers, which could be website customers, could be other things. And that's a lot, but that wasn't a media spend. And it's not, and also there's an addressable market of 180,000, 200,000 properties. And come to think of it, I guess G5 also had moving and storage. So there was that was a pretty good chunk of their client base. So even though they seem like monsters, they're not near, meaning in size, or can feel that way at times. They're not nearly obviously what CoStar has done for the ILS on the ILS side, where they're getting a really good chunk of the space. So why is it that agencies typically don't scale, or other service companies?
Well, I'm going to turn that around since I'm not as prepped. I mean, there's some obvious stuff that we can probably cover off here in the first 3 minutes, but I almost want to take a different approach to answering this, which is what are multifamily marketers and operators looking for from an agency? So instead of what prevents them from scaling, asking that question, what motivates them to sign with an agency? Is it cost? Is it, institutional knowledge? Is it customer experience? And then as we get through that list of what typically is, in consideration, what can't be scaled versus just wide open, like what's preventing. There's two sides to that. I'm just saying for me, my brain started to go that direction. It's like, so if cost is one of the driving decisions, which it is for most products and services, what part of that can't you scale?
Well, what's interesting is like, even if you back out to just marketing, like your experience in radio or at newspapers or what have you, or my experience, it seemed like to me that the multifamily acts more like an SMB. And for SMBs, there's a lot of distrust out there about like, are these people
100%.
ripping me off or not? So then it comes down to how do you build trust with the client? And most of the companies, even the larger media companies, they still like the best reps are the reps that can like quickly earn someone's trust and, end up building a reputation. And then people are like, cool. So it's hard to scale that person, right? And so then to get to scale beyond that, you either have to get lots of those people, which is almost like the McKinsey business model or something, right? Where you're like trying to, okay, these are the best people, so let's bring them together. Or you have to productize your service. And that's eventually where I was going to get with my notes, where it's like, how can you make, as you were saying, the customer experience great, no matter if you have the best person on the job or not? And I think most service companies sort of struggle. It's almost like crossing the chasm or something, right? Where it's like they start with the owner or whatever, and the owner goes out there and builds the trust, and people are like, great, I'll get on with them. And then before long, the owner's overwhelmed, and it's like, I just need help, and so they try to hire bodies, but they're sort of like, the way that it gets launched is like almost like person centric and so then it's not like they're ready to start recruiting like McKinsey does now. Like once you get to a certain scale, you can start doing that. And that happens all the time, even with like financial advisors, where like different banks are recruiting other financial advisors over because of the trust they have with their clients. Because why use this bank versus that bank, right? So yeah, I think it's the people. First off, it's the people problem, because I think first off, it's the customer experience / trust. You could do it either via a person or through the, I guess, just really systematizing the process.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree with you. I was gonna maybe, I don't know, position it slightly differently as it relates to people, but I was gonna go to my macaroni grow.
Yep.
But so for those that haven't heard, because I feel like we've had to mention that once or twice on this, but just the challenge in scaling is the dilution of your product, service, or customer experience. And somebody that worked at the second macaroni grill back in the day in Austin, and then watched it grow to the point that it did dilute and compromise the identity that it had built, the reputation it had built, and then they started shutting down stores. And that story, I think, happens over and over. And sometimes it's more public, sometimes it's less.
Yeah.
But just quickly tying it to this question of digital agencies, it's very difficult. It may be surprisingly difficult to build an incredible reputation with great people, 10 to 20, and then be able to maintain that up to 50 to 75 to 100 to 200, because each person that's interacting with that property, I mean, that is very similar to a franchise model, but that's their experience of your brand.
Yep.
And it becomes, I know it, we're living it, just how difficult it is to maintain the same level of confidence, trust, and performance and experience.
So sticking on Macaroni Grill for a second, of course, I should have thought that you'd bring that up, but it's a great example. What do you think is different? Or let me ask you, do you think it's different for Shake Shack?
Then Macaroni Grill?
Meaning, like, do you still have high esteem for Shake Shack versus Macaroni Grill? Because I'm trying to think of.
I don't think I ever had high esteem for Shake Shack.
Really? Okay.
I'm not saying I just not a regular patron. Okay. I don't know if I've
ever. It came out of a Michelin star, like.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah. That's why I was thinking, wow. Like, what is something high end that has scaled a lot? Yada yada. So
interesting. Yeah, you caught me off guard with that one, because I was going to say the bar is low for QSRs versus Macaroni Grill. Its reputation was completely based on the experience. I mean, and speaking for us, Digible, I think that's what we were known for early. And
yeah.
Talking to you, talking to Nicole, myself, and then the first 10, 20. So maybe I should slow down and let you. Is there more to unpack, or with the Shake Shack?
Well, I was curious because about like why you think it went downhill. Like some of the examples you used to give with Macaroni Grill to me were when the line would be long and they would it was unlimited wine, or I don't know if that was free. I think it was like on the honor system of how many glasses.
Good memory. It was the honor system. And so they would have these tumblers, 8 to 10 ounces in the weight area, and these giant jugs of Chianti and other different types of wine, Rosata. And we would be on 2-hour waits, and you could just pour yourself. You didn't need a server to do it for you. And then you'd come to the table and on the honor system would write down with a crayon how many glasses you had.
Yeah. And it seems like that's the kind of thing why can't you scale that? It's our last podcast on. So you think they were upside down?
I don't think they were upside down. I think like any business that's starting to scale, grows, has bigger ambitions, you start to look at those types of things and say, is that really necessary? And that's what often.
What's our ROI on the one?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you think about it, if you have hundreds of stores and thousands and tens of thousands of those jugs, and you were to just say, no, a server needs to pour that now instead of them getting to pour it themselves, they may have saved themselves $1 million in 1 year.
But it's I think that's the debate. I guess
that's the short-sighted part,
right?
Because it's like if people stop coming in,
right?
Then you end up profitable for a few years, and then you end up losing on the long game.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it because Shake Shack, they've gotten very like scientific now with like their recipes. So like they like monitor like TikTok and what's trending. And then they're like, oh shoot, we should do something for St. Patty's Day. And so then they have a lab back in New York where just chefs basically testing like, oh, can we make the St. Patty's shake or whatever? But one of the stories I'd heard from them was that they wanted to release a pretty, I say standard, it was like a bacon cheeseburger. But the chef specifically was like, I think it's important that we add a certain kind of cheese and they could source that wherever. But they wanted to add watercress to the burger. And they couldn't get watercress, like apparently like good quality watercress, what they wanted up in the Pacific Northwest. So they're like, well, we could do like 2/3 of our portfolio, but the last third we can't source the watercress. So then they have to kill the watercress, and then they have to decide like, do we still release the burger without it, or do we replace it with like iceberg lettuce or whatever instead? And so I can see those choices. It's like a sourcing issue where you, which is just slightly different than the people. It's like, can you source enough of the right kind of people? This is like, can you source enough of the right kind of fresh ingredients?
Yeah.
And that's why like Taco Bell or doesn't like they have someone that makes all the stuff, and it's like it's keeping the menu complexity down to scale the people, right? So I think it all comes down to people, because at Taco Bell you're like, okay, well, we don't want them like really cooking the meat. We want them to open a bag where it's already done and seasoned, and we want to keep the number of ingredients that are establishment below 12, for example. And so that's why like Chipotle is interesting, because I think they have like 53 ingredients or something. And certainly some of those happen offsite. Like I see them in the back, like opening up bags of chicken or something. But anyways, but they've been able to scale those ingredients across 1,000+ locations or whatever, and be able to productize the process enough where the staff in the back can still kind of handle it. So anyways, I think the same thing happens with service companies. Where like you're saying, like, okay, maybe when Reid's in front of a customer, he does it this way, and that makes them trust him, and they get excited, and then they'll buy. But now when you start hiring a sales staff or whoever, an account management team, and they don't have the same pizzazz as Reid, because like how much of the job is really out there selling versus executing and client handling. And so when you start breaking it apart, I can definitely see over time how you almost do the macaroni grill. Like, we can kill the wine. We don't really need to. Yeah, like when Nicole would meet with customers, she learned their favorite flower and would send it to them as a surprise. But like, do we really need to send the flowers? Does that really matter? It's like over time, that cuts.
For sure. And it's so hard to know because of, I guess, the example of the flower, but like all the little touches, little ways that certain people do things to build trust and build a relationship. How do you really kind of do the regression modeling on knowing whether the flower mattered or not? Because it's like, well, there's 10 other things Nicole did. And yeah, I mean, it's just a very difficult thing to identify the magic, I'll say, because we use that word a lot, and not in a cavalier manner, but that we created together some magic at Digible that employees felt, and I think our clients felt. But how would you pull that apart or deconstruct it and say what should stay and what shouldn't? I mean, we have figured out, some of our staples when it comes to customer experience, if we stay on this thread a little bit longer, which is things like response time, not just being a robot on a call, like tell a data story, ask, more about at the property level, like, the more sub-market like type questions discovery. I mean, I won't go on and on. I'm just saying we know what our staples are, but I don't know we would be able to do what I was describing, and like, what could we let go of?
Some of it takes faith, right? Is like, that's where you need like someone to have the vision to say like, this matters, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Just make the call
versus like the bean counting sort of way that is not a bad thing, because it's just more of like the short term, long term, as you said, like trade off. I'm going to come back to people in a bit, but I want to talk about margin compression.
I had that on my list.
Okay, well then you start.
I connect that to I'm going to be very specific about digital agencies, and this doesn't necessarily have to also apply to multifamily, but in general, why you don't see more of them scaling larger. And it has to do with margin compression and the commodity nature of it, meaning like if we're reselling Google ads and then somebody else is, how big of a difference is there between Digible and that other agency, or even a guy in his garage, as we joke around, that's running that stuff? And and when I say you'd like to believe, I do believe there's there are real differences, but if the performance is not, and we just talked about this in the last podcast, but like significantly different. Your cost per lead is $20 with Digible and it's $200 with that other agency. Then you don't have enough of a delta, I'll say, or advantage on your value proposition that in other products, technology, service, they might. And so there's just not a feeling like it's a no-brainer. I think in terms of like the mafia offer or the moat, like that it's so clear that this company is head and shoulders above these other options. And if you can't develop that as an agency or as a service company, then it becomes, more about price. And how much can you really flex with price if you're a service company with that amount of pressure, margin compression? And so it's like, I don't have the luxury of charging 20% of what my competitor does.
Well, you don't get the economies of scale.
Right.
Like on the media spend.
To be more direct about it. Yeah. But I just see the two together, because given that, again, there's a real challenge in digital agencies, to have big differences in performance, maybe not as much on customer experience. I still think that there are some pretty big gaps there. But even on the data and technology, then you move to price. And if the economies of scale aren't there, then whoever's running that agency can't flex as much. And so guess what? You're not going to grow as much.
Yeah, it's the price thing's interesting because we've met with many owners over the years that have said like, well, great, you guys do X millions of dollars in Google spend, so you get like a deal. It's like, no, it doesn't work. It's not like buying concrete or something where it's like now you're buying X tons, so you get a deal.
We get wholesale rates from Google.
Yeah, they just don't do that.
They think that,
but that's how many of the American companies have sort of scaled. And they're like, well, I'll take 1% of $1 billion versus whatever 10% of $1 million. Google doesn't think that way, and in a way, bless them, right? Because if they did, then maybe we would have had way more like like just roll up conglomerates where they're like where you can't compete them, or we couldn't have competed them. So there's that. Then there's also the going back to the people. I want to tie that to the margin. Let's say that you need someone every 10 people, make it super easy. He needs a manager or so. It's like, okay, great. So that then means every 10 people you take a 10% haircut or whatever, right, on labor, because now you got to add overhead. But it doesn't exactly go like that, because obviously you usually don't want someone managing 10 people, and usually there are multiple departments, and you got to do it by person number 11. You can't wait till we get to person 20 to hire that second manager. And then you have all the back office staff too. So over time you go from where at first like Reid, David, Nicole can do invoices and handle HR or whatever, to now all of a sudden you need teams for that. And it's, I don't know, maybe 20% of the overhead or something, plus back to like you're eating into that margin. So if you're on the same margin or the same pricing model as the person in their garage, you're having to take out of your margin that the solopreneur can kind of be like, I'll handle it myself.
100%. And we're definitely.
Maybe we start giving out free wine though. Maybe we could then do this.
More like free LaCroix or whatever, Waterloos or Topo Chicos, as I'm finishing one right here. But where was I going to go with that? What did you just say
Well, just the solopreneur can handle it.
Oh yeah. Thank you. I feel like I was on a decent streak since I had my last blackout or whatever you want to call it. Senior moment, is that we are adding more and more strategic positions. And so you're saying back office, but the bigger you get, the other part of that equation is these people that help get you there don't want to stay in the roles they're in forever.
Right.
And so
Right.
you start to feel the internal pressure of supporting that growth and evolution. And there's some really compelling, cases out there of like, hey, if we had somebody just focused on business analysis, what that could mean for our clients or what could mean for our business. And over time, especially if you're getting into numbers like we've gotten to 100 plus, that has the same impact you're describing with the managers if you're not careful. And so now when we are looking at job recs, and I've been really clear with our CFO and COO about this, if we're not seeing that it's going to positively impact. So I've put out 6 decision filters, and it starts with revenue, gross margin, and EBITDA, which may sound gross, but it also, I think, has actually landed shockingly well with our company, with the staff, because I just have asked them, hey, if you were running a business and somebody came to you with an investment or a suggestion and it did not net neutral, like as far as impact those 3 things, why would you do it? And everybody just kind of looked, at each other. This was during the town hall. It's like, probably wouldn't. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, if you're running a business and neither of those 3, or it's not net positive, why would you do it? And eventually you could say, well, we're trying to just build our reputation. And so it's about our reputation, or it's about thought leadership, et cetera. And that's in those decision filters. So just saying openly for Digible, it starts with those 3. And then I have connectivity as another decision filter. It's like, if this doesn't connect to what we're ultimately trying to do, then I also don't know why we're doing it. And then if it doesn't positively impact our culture, then it doesn't mean it just gets shot down straight, but it's like, I want to understand. And if it doesn't positively improve our reputation, meaning in the industry, and that could slow us down as far as growth. I don't know that it's going to speed us up, but trying to figure out exactly how I was tying this, but just in thinking about agencies,
where the margin starts to or the costs,
right,
expand.
Thank you. Yeah, and so the more profitable that a company can become, the more I think that they can scale, do things that they wouldn't do otherwise. But just to get over that hump, it's incredibly difficult for the reasons that we've been calling out. Is like, now we have enough cash reserves, now we have enough profits that we can look at scaling in a way that we hadn't in the past. Because you and I talked about that very early on. It's like, hey, there's things now that we can't, like when we're not big, that we should be doing because we won't be able to do them later. And that is how there's a proliferation of agencies, because they'll do that. It's like, we'll do whatever it takes, but they can't get over the hump. The chasm, as you say.
Yeah, that is a perfect segue into the next thing. So I might come back to the margin thing, but I want to talk about the complexity of customization. So when you're a smaller company and the founders or whoever are the ones talking with clients, and a client's like, well, the reason I don't work with that firm is because they can't meet with me on Tuesdays or whatever. It's like, we'll meet with you on Tuesdays, no problem. You want to meet twice? I got you. And then, but at some point you, like that kind of it's like Starbucks right now. The old Chipotle CEO went over the Starbucks, and now he's like, we're killing menu items, right? We're taking out because they have X 100,000 of recipes that they can do.
God.
And blessing and a curse, right? Because Starbucks amazingly had scaled to like tens of thousands of locations with those, like allowing you to customize every drink. But now, as he's used to at Chipotle, and I think anyways, he's like, okay, if we can get this down to like 6 items, it really removes a lot of the logistical, hell that we're dealing with. And by the way, I'm kind of upset about this because my local Starbucks said, yeah, they're getting rid of black tea and green tea. I was like, so wait a second, so there's not going to be basically tea available at Starbucks anymore? He's like, well, no, if you want like the sugar chai or whatever, we got that. I'm like, can you give me something without sugar? I just want some
lost
standard
David
tea.
Saley as a customer at
Yeah,
Starbucks.
so I bring my own tea bags with me if I go now. So I'm like, I just want some standard tea.
If I can just quickly on the customization. So they've been doing these, air quotes, CEO circle meetings, but meeting with lots of people in our company over the last 6 months, just looking for feedback, trying to spend more time listening than talking, which isn't the easiest thing for me, but it's been great hearing, how they're feeling about culture, how they're feeling about their roles, like creative ideas, etc. And one of the I don't know if I'd call them ideas, but I have started a lot of these meetings with start, stop, continue. It's like, just tell me what you think Digible should start doing, stop doing, and continue doing. And Amelia on our paid media team, who's been with us for 4 or 5 years now, and a killer, meaning in a good way, paid media strategist, she said, I feel like we should start customizing more, like bringing, and she did say in a way, bringing some of that back. We didn't spend a ton of time on it because I feel like some of the things she was describing, I'm not sure that we were doing too much of that before, but either way, her point was we need to look into doing more custom stuff. And I said, well, what's your theory? And she's like, that it's going to drive performance. And I was like, and what does performance drive? And she's like, well, more revenue. And I was like, all right, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Back through the decision filters. But is there a point, for what she's recommending? And I haven't spent the time with her on that, but 2 to 3 years, like, let's look further ahead, because it's great sometimes to spotlight certain, experiments, related to like more custom and almost reverting back to the founder days. But then inevitably you have to come back and ask the question. It's like, well, what if this is really successful, Amelia? Can we keep up with that?
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of the whole, like, if you can't do it for 10 years, don't do it for a day kind of mentality. And I agree with that in pockets, but I also think there's, as you were saying, like many startups have said, I tell them do things that don't scale. It's like, if it's important enough, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You think it doesn't scale, but you can get it there. And we've customized our campaigns more than any of the other like name brands that I know of. And so it's interesting to hear, like, let's do even more of that. And I know some of our stuff had gotten less, I guess you want to talk about the way it's structured, less customized, but it's because of the automation through like with the pricing and availability to come in. So then you have to build the campaign in X way so that the data feed can come in properly. And so then that sort of locks it down. But I think it's an awesome suggestion to say, let's look back at it again and say like, okay, great. We have those now. Now what can we do to like maybe open it up or re-customize it? Particularly because Google's platform is changing a lot right now too with all the AI stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, guess what she was advocating for and actually recommended to, I think it was ResPage. So is a portfolio that we're just getting some properties with. I'm going to go ahead and say it here. I think it's fine. And they were looking for different suggestions from their previous agency. I'm paraphrasing here. This happens all the time between agencies, all the time. It's like they're not doing this or they are doing that, and then they size us up or size up, another agency. And that often ends up being a key part of the decision process are those comparisons. And one of the things Amelia suggested was Bing.
And she's just trying to get gold star.
He did not know. I think I must have let go of the Bing train in 2020 right before we hired her or something. I don't know, because I feel like we hired her. I think we hired her in 21. For those that don't know, I had been on a Bing crusade the first 2 or 3 years. Don't you think it's probably 2 or 3 years?
Another Masogi of Reid's.
Yeah, it was another Masogi. But I was like, you could get such better impression share, better cost per lead, cost per click. I mean, it's the same, and but the question was how can we scale it? And at the time, Adam, our first employee, but he was in the original 4, said this isn't going to work, and part of it was, I think, some question around the quality of the leads, but it was more so about the scale. And so when Amelia mentioned this, she was like, I don't know why we don't do this more. And guess what? It helped land another property. And the feedback is we really appreciate that you're recommending Bing and we're excited to test it. Perfect example.
That's a great example
of like, there's your customization, the door opens and it's like, does Digible step through that door or do we like say, no, green tea, black tea, we don't do that.
I'm all about Starbucks. Like, I think like they did it meaning they did it in a good way. They showed you can scale something with hundreds of ingredients, to thousands of locations. So I don't see that as a bad thing. Like if you're deliberate and can pull it off, and then you give the customer what they want.
Yeah. Yeah, seems so simple.
Yeah. So to that point, though, on the revenue, and it's kind of taking me back for a second, like the complexity of this stuff is hard to scale, particularly as you have different people, as you were saying, wanting to move up in the organization, and maybe the Amelias have been left behind. So now how does she train her replacement? But also more revenue doesn't equal more profit, right? So when you do get the big deals often will come as like a concentrated like channel. And it may be like, you know what, I'm gonna move all my paid search over to you, which is already the lowest margin. And then it may be like, and since I'm going to give you like $1 million in spend here, I want it at half off or whatever. It's like, it's going to take us the same amount of people. In fact, it's going to take more people to manage your $1 million than all of these other clients. Oh, why is that, Digible? It's like, because you're going to want a strategist, or you're going to want like some like heavy hitter squad. Like you're going to want a team. You're going to want this badass team. So you're asking me to hire people over 6 figures and more of them, and you want to pay half the rate. Is it worth it? Basically, is what it comes down to, right?
It completely comes down to that. And, in several of the Jim Collins books, but he says, if you want to sustain, I think it's has built to last, but you have to have fanatical discipline and face the ruthless facts about your business. And this would be one of them potentially, is that making that choice or working with that larger client is actually not good for the business. And hence he, recommends the SMAC code, or the SMAC recipe, sorry, which is effectively an operating code for a company. And it's your do's and don'ts. And he, obviously we've said it several times in this podcast, but the Southwest, which funny enough now has assigned seating or is doing away with that. But for forever and ever, they had this operating code, and that in fact enabled them to scale by saying no to, I'm going to try to make the draw to the paid search, like $1 million scenario, but they were able to hold the line. And in fact, that resulted in a company scaling.
A great example of that with Southwest was the hot food. We'll never serve hot food. It's like, oh, but this thing just from Dallas to Seattle opened up. You could take that thoroughfare. It's like, yeah, but then we'd have to serve hot food. Can't do it.
Yeah.
Right. It'd be easy when you're in the struggling days to be like, I could use that revenue of a new location, but it changes everything.
The temptations of growth. And I think it's partly built into founders' mindsets and like even the profile of a founder, visionary, thinking big, thinking growth minded. And so it's so difficult to get that mental model, changed or shifted, where it's like, no, you're going to have to say no to more things in order to run a successful business. But it may not be a business that scales. It may not be a business that grows a ton. Then you get into the gap in the gain.
Yeah.
And you get into perspective.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say another thing on the people front and the founder trust is a lot of times, and I wouldn't say this was an ego thing, but we've talked about Rand Fishkin, but it's like a victim of his own success of like, hey, I'll go ahead and start pumping out these weekly videos so people start to understand trust our brand, and start to use our tooling. And next thing you know, he's like hostage to the videos, where it's like, we don't want to see the videos from anybody but Rand. Why'd you put this other person on the team on the video? It's like, because he became almost too popular too fast, that it's like, we only want to see that celebrity.
Totally.
We don't want to see anybody else. And now he can't really do the other founder things. Maybe he wants to do the growth mindset stuff he wants to do. And so he's got to make a choice. Like, do I hire a professional CEO and just fill this like celebrity role for now? Or do I let go of that? And so you can't, you just can't duplicate yourself. So you have to make choices of like, where am I now best fitting with the organization at the time?
For sure. Well, do you think it's good or bad? I'm going to try to push you to lean one way or the other, that agencies are not scaling or capable of scaling. And this has a lot to do with just your perspective on business, perhaps, like what you think is good for, I don't want to say the economy, but I'm trying not to go macro, but this is an interesting question to ask, and I brought this up 2-3 years ago with Cena, when we were talking about all the consolidation and the big tech companies acquiring, like in multifamily. I was like, is it actually a bad thing that RealPage has acquired 70 companies? I'm exaggerating, or maybe I'm not. But now related to digital agencies or agencies, good or bad that they struggle to scale?
For the industry or for the person?
Answer both. But let's start with industry. Is it good or bad for the multifamily? Now I'm going to be super explicit here and specific that there are very few agencies that have gained scale.
I see agencies as less of an issue versus like the platforms and the data. So I think in one way it's good that everyone that like the property management systems came in and standardized things so that you can have 1,000 properties in the same software. But they've obviously walled a lot of that off, so that makes it challenging that stifles innovation in the industry. So that part's bad for the industry. So good that there's one system, bad that it's stifled. On the agency front, I don't see that as, I don't really, I don't know that it's good or bad. I think it just is what it is. But I'd say that if there was less stifling by the systems, then it would allow more agencies in, and I think that competition would then be good because it's back to innovation. So, yeah, I'd say it's more of a factor of the industry, right? Versus like it wasn't like a choice that agencies haven't scaled.
Maybe there's more choices than we know, but I think I'm.
It's almost like it's almost like I'm thinking of like there's a lot of change in the like is it the Federal Trade Commission right now with like the changeover of the who's running it, and like if you think about it, like if this was a country, multifamily, it'd be like, well, we have some players so big that they snap up all these companies, to your point, before they get big enough to like rock someone's business model or challenge the incumbents, and that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
But I am glad that they exist like in some capacity because the industry is already super spreadsheet heavy. And could you imagine if there wasn't like, the large property management systems out there, just sort of how annoying that would be. So I think it's a net positive, but and not as big of a deal that the agencies haven't gotten so big.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you take a different stance?
I think that when a company, and being again specific, digital agency scale in this industry, that there's a lot more learned than when it's like diluted. You mentioned not in this pathway, I guess, but with data, but technology results. Like if we hadn't scaled, if we hadn't gotten more and more looks, right, in different markets with different strategies, built up with different clients, our understanding, our value proposition wouldn't be what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we now engage with a client and within 5 minutes, they're like, okay, you guys clearly get it. You understand it. You have scaled all that stuff. I do think that, but I couldn't tell you other than probably an experience. I think in experience, that's where there's a real benefit to the industry for companies that have scaled. But I don't know how much of a benefit there is for performance. I can't stop thinking now on these three pillars of data, technology, performance. Yeah, marketing, performance, and then experience. But if I were thinking in those terms, it's like, is there a cost advantage to the scaling? Not. It doesn't seem like that to me, as far as the benefit to the industry. And then I move, to those three kind of, it's like, is this somehow benefiting in the tech and data? Quite frankly, a lot of the agencies aren't as tech forward as they might seem, or you might think. So I don't see that really making much difference. And then I think experience and performance may actually be better off with companies like with more agencies, not less. If you're the marketer, I don't know. I'm starting to really speculate, but on the experience side, I would say it is a net positive.
Well, maybe like you get the individual hand holding, but it doesn't help you if you then have to talk to like 14 agencies for your monthly stuff, right? So that makes it a poor experience.
Yeah. I just mean if a company hasn't, it's a different version of tenure. When you think of an employee, it's like, I think they say, an employee crosses over at 3 years as far as like the amount of value they are to an employer. And for an agency, there's limits to how valuable wouldn't there be that they are if they've run 50 campaigns versus 500.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, when you work with us now, you're working with 8 years and collectively hundreds of years of experience. And I think that creates a better...
As long as you fit their mold, right? Like the co-living, you brought it up, I think, on a different recording, but it's like, oh shoot, but that doesn't really fit into the way we structure our campaign. For example, I don't know if that was for us or not. I can't recall, but yeah, if it was like slightly out of the norm, then it can be challenging because you're like trying to fit in and break someone's process. I'm very cognizant of breaking people's process. I don't know if I was as cognizant of that before we started the company, but now I always ask, I'm like, this doesn't seem like what you normally deal with. So should we call it a quick no, or do we move forward?
No, I love that you definitely have taken that approach more and more in a variety of ways, but I think it's a good thing to call out.
I was just doing a travel agency, trying to help them plan this trip. And I was like, seems like I'm breaking your process here. It's like, I think maybe we should call it. And they're like, well, hang on, we have a secret menu item. And it's like, okay, let's talk about that and see if it's a fit. So that was just interesting. Okay, I have client churn was another issue. So like acquiring customers in a service-based usually requires a lot of courting, hand-holding. That it's not like a SaaS thing. You used to talk about this a lot, where it's like, oh, I just want to be able to like buy now and launch my campaign. And that's where a lot of other systems have gone with SaaS, but in service is still not there, right? And so therefore, there's a lot of lead up time, and with all the conversations and vetting both sides, and then there's like implementation time, which takes a number of months because of all the restrictions and IT stuff and whatever. And next thing you know, you're like, I went to bubble test this thing, and it's 4 months before we really got started, and then we need like 3 months test, so you're 7 months in, and so that takes time. And then like in SaaS, they'll sometimes have like 10% churn a year, but if you have like, that makes it harder, right? So like the bigger you go, the more 10% matters, right? And so if all of a sudden you're trying to replace 10, let's just say it was 1% a month, so that's 12% a year or whatever. And then if you're growing on top of it, it's like, let's say you want to grow 20% this year, but you're going to churn 12%. Now you're actually growing 32% this year, right? And if you think about like, how do we grow our company by 32%? Do we need to add a third more employees, or do we need to add actually more? Because we just said about if you're at a certain scale, if you have 100 people, and then you need all the middle management or whatever HR stuff. So that's where it gets hard to continue to scale at that rate, just because of the complexity of the people. And then of like the customers, like a little bit of churn is actually 1% a month. It's actually a lot of churn.
It is. It's a great call out, how quickly that can add up, especially as you do grow. I'm going to add funding to this equation. I
was going to get there.
Okay. My assumption is that with agencies specifically, is that overwhelmingly they're bootstrapped. Early days. I'm not saying that they don't obviously get acquired. We've seen it in this industry. And so isn't that also a big factor? I mean, just the money and being able to scale, or why you don't see them grow more, is they just simply don't have the money. They have to make the P&L work every month.
Yeah, since VCs don't think that service scales, they don't want to invest in it. And so then therefore you're stuck going to some sort of private lending, or you could try bank lending, but in the early days you don't have enough cash flow for the bank to want to lend you. Even like it's challenging even with the SBA. So you got to get to a certain scale with them. And even if they do, they are more thinking in like 5 or 10 year chunks. And so they don't want to see a lot of growth necessarily. Like they're more of like, hey, you're getting this loan for 5 years and that's going to help you, versus like, I'm going to need another loan in a year or a year after that because I'm my cash flow needs are growing, right? And so to your point, like let's imagine that you were doing, I don't know, let's say the average campaign's $100 or $1,000 and you make 10% at the end of the day. It's $100. It's like, okay, but I need to hire new staff for to take on this next portfolio or whatever. How many campaigns do you need to support that person that's $100,000 with burden? I should do the math on that. That's a lot of properties.
Yes, for sure. Well, and
yeah, so you'd have to have basically like 83 properties or so, like on that of the $1,000 a piece, just to break even. So like, how can you be ready to give them 83 properties at once? Otherwise, you're covering their labor, and then that's before you make profit. And if they cap at 100 properties or whatever, it's like that doesn't give you much margin to save to then like invest in that next hire.
You're starting to make me wonder how we're sitting here right now.
It's all a simulation.
Yeah, right. Deep AI fake. What about leadership? Do you think that that factors into this equation as well? So when you think about bootstrap service businesses, are these leaders typically schooled in how to scale a business? Whether it's actually academic or whether they've brought that have had that experience before. Because I believe that a big part of being able to scale business is not, it's all the things we described, but isn't it also the team? And if you have either founders, and it's usually not because of a lack of growth mindset, but they may just not be operators. They may not know how to go about it. And they, back to the funding, don't have the money, or Masogi are not willing to make a big bet, on professionalizing or leveling up, right? Spending the kind of money that would really be necessary to bring in true operators. And so it's just partly our experience, but we've, I think, gotten way better about that. And the who versus the how. But the how is important. It's, I understand how it starts with who. I'm trying to connect the two of these, but the who, if you get the right who people, then they know how to scale.
Yeah. Yeah, they can, but they may not know how to scale together, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, you're better with the sports teams than I am, but like if you're trading players all the time and they're used to the Popovich system and not the other system or something, it's that's tough.
Yep.
Right. And you don't typically have, in what we're talking about, kind of going and scaling up from the ground, you don't have the Popovich running the show throughout the process, right? That has 40 years of experience or something. Be like, this is my playbook that works.
Yeah. Well, and then retention of top talent, because there's so many of these agencies and it is very competitive, but do you feel like it's harder to maintain top talent at a service company or an agency than it is? And maybe it's not. I'm just posing it as one of the other things that could make it challenging to scale is if you can't attract and retain top talent. How do you really scale?
I think it can be tough. I don't know if it's harder because you'll have basically service people that work at a service company typically in the agency side will make less, but yet they feel very tangential to tech. And so they're looking at tech salaries and thinking like, oh, I'll be a product manager at Meta or whatever. And they're like, and I'm going to make twice the money. It's like, that seems like a good thing. And so you will have people that are like, even if you were to give them 20%, 30% raise, they're not getting near the Meta salary. Right. So then they have to make a choice and say like, do I really like this culture and what I have here and how much impact I have compared to going to Meta? Like, I think that sometimes people forget how important that is for their own fulfillment, and they'll go and take the bigger tech salary where they will have less impact but make a higher, typically less impact, make a higher salary. There's also the reason that like the McKinseys of the world or these like financial advisor like conglomerates have scaled is they just do it's kind of like the attorney model where it's like, all right, you come over here and you're going to be a partner one day. And so there's a path. And that's, if you look at any of the big service companies, or at least many of the big consultancy service companies, it's the path to scale has been make everybody partner. The challenge I also see with the partnership angle though is it sort of pulls people into this very wildly unbalanced work-life sort of integration where it's like, we are expecting you to burn 80, 100 hours a week until you make partner. Now, once you make partner, it's like you've been anointed or something, right? Like now you have tenure, I think you mentioned earlier. And you can pull back some, but if you pull back too much, my understanding is the other partners will be like, Frank is not pulling his weight around here. Like it's time for him to go. It's like, so now you've sunk cost all this stuff in, and if you don't keep it up, they may make a move on you.
Totally.
So I think it can be challenging, I guess, is my point.
I think you were about to wrap us up, but I'm still going to throw this one in there. What about, and I mean, we're very public with so much on this podcast, but one of our challenges with scaling has been the nuances, even at scale. I know this may sound funny, but we've learned to scale. But one of the things that has prevented us from, it seems to me, hitting yet another level is that when we try to work with third-party technology, our own suppliers or vendors that try to help digital agency scale, they've really struggled with us because they're like, you guys have all these kind of nuances.
Yeah.
And so it's not a plug and play. And I don't think we're alone there, but maybe other agencies hit that sooner. I'm not sure, but I think that when you're, bootstrapped, again, you have a small team and you're building this stuff, you're not thinking 5 years out, like whether you're going to be set up to be compatible with other third-party technology that is used to scaling. And so that's been very frustrating. Sometimes I feel good about it, back to like, we still have customization, we still have nuances, so am I willing to let go of those in favor of like getting to another level of scale? Right now, obviously we like where we're at, but
it's interesting. It's like, what's the goal of the organization? Right. Because like at some point, maybe it was a good thing to be the challenger brand or what have you, and we do it this way. And then at some point, is it actually better, as you were saying, for the industry to be like, we're going to get rid of the free wine, and now this is the experience you get, and you know what you're getting. So it's like at the Starbucks, I know what I'm getting, right? And that is that okay, versus like intentionally staying certain size or whatever. So it's just, I think it's a great thing for a brand to ask itself. And I would say, basically, to me, it seems like it's their responsibility to let their clients know if they're changing course. Right. It's like Starbucks, like, hey, we're going to be starting to eliminate some menu items. It's not going to be quite as customized as it was before. Heads up. And now it's different with like a simple transaction like that versus like when there's this switch cost of agencies, right? We're not as bad as a property management system switch cost, but there's still the almost like that. I feel like I'm getting to you with the got to clear the throat. There's the just like equity basically, and so much of the stuff is more like soft skill knowledge than it is like hard data that you can just be like pick and lift over and move to another agency. So I actually had two other things I was going to ask you about before, just to go a little bit longer. One was, and maybe this is a whole other episode, so you can hit the emergency button. Okay, we can wait. But does AI F this up and change this whole scaling issue?
F this up?
I just mean like disrupt things. Like, how would that impact the challenges that that agencies or service companies have scaled before?
It'd be too easy, but I'll still say it. I absolutely think it will disrupt things and change several of the issues we discussed. So I can't go back through the 18 bullets we had, but yes, I would say it is significantly going to change things.
Okay. Well, that'll be fun. Maybe we do that separately, because I want to dive into a little bit on that. The last one is more of a fun one. CoStar has been very successful, I think, by anyone's account, as far as their scaling on the marketing front and beyond. But when we first stepped into the industry, a lot of our conversations with clients are like, man, can you believe they're getting Kelly Clarkson to do the like whatever show for you, like ahead of their thing? Like, wouldn't you rather take your money elsewhere? Because doesn't that show how much margin or whatever they have that they can bring in Clarkson for a private whatever
private event?
Yeah. So have you changed your tune on that at all? Or I'll stop there first.
About, like, I guess, how obnoxious that is, or
well,
did I not filter that well enough?
I think it's because I used to have a hard time believing that they would actually do it. But it's kind of like you were saying to me offline about Daniel Pink's costs to like come and do like a thing.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, sure, if it costs 60 or 100 grand, let's say 100 grand to bring Clarkson in, that's a lot of money. But when you're doing $4 billion or whatever a year in advertising, like, what's 100 grand? Like, so I just think it's interesting, because in the beginning, my stance was very, like, look how wasteful this is. Like, shouldn't you like be pushing back on like how much margin they're making that they can afford it? But on the other hand, I'm now like, big numbers, like it makes it kind of easier to spend the 100. Now, is there the ROI? It's back to the, like you were saying about your filters. Like, does it help the brand image? Does it help the industry or the company? It's like, maybe, because some people really had fun at Clarkson, right? So like,
we heard that, and have still heard that the donuts are either being missed or still appreciated. Just like what the CoStar, big slip up there. No, what they, that they were known. It reminded me of pharmaceuticals. Obviously I spent a few years in there, and I felt bad sometimes for some of the competitive reps that would come in and didn't have, Panera or something.
Yeah.
And it was just the advantage that we had because we were bigger. We had a lot more discretionary funds and budget to do those kinds of things. But then it's like, don't hate me because of it. They're just taking advantage of that. But I feel like if you have that much scale, money, profits, shame on you for not bringing Kelly Clarkson to each property, much less, to the event. But that is a different stance probably than how I felt, when we were first getting started. It was kind of like, using the word obnoxious. It was kind of like this, isn't there a better place? But if you're printing money, then
it doesn't.
Why not?
What's interesting about that, it doesn't have to exactly be about that you have high margin, right? Because yes, I was saying earlier in this conversation, more revenue doesn't mean more profit because of some other things. But once you've actually sort of like crossed the chasm and you found the scale, then maybe now it's kind of it still feels a little back to the growth mindset, a little sad to be like, why don't we invest that in R&D? But it's like, probably still investing a lot in R&D.
Yeah, exactly.
And also can do the Clarkson thing. Now, again, is it worth 100,000? Because like, let's say, I guess there's more than 1,000 people that show up at that thing, because then you're paying $100 per person for them to see Clarkson.
Yeah, I don't know, but I was just wondering if they have some version of the dip, that we built for Digible, but that's the digital investment paradigm. But when we became profitable, and I don't know if we'd already established some version of that before, but certainly afterwards, and we were like, okay, we're actually building up some cash and some profits. Where might we point that money? Kelly Clarkson wasn't on our wheel, but it's like how much of that should be going back to tech, R&D versus to employees versus marketing, branding,
I know you were just talking about the sweepstakes, but this to me is a much more interesting Masoki. Is like, can we get Clarkson to do the Digible concert at NAA? And then like just be like, I know whoever
that's going well beyond your 50% rubric.
Who knows where CoStar is going to get at this point? But
how is it that Goldblum still hasn't shown up? Yeah. It's like, for as much as they've tried, and I don't know if I'd say it's successful or not, but the amount of money that they put in that, to have that guy. What's the name? The fake name?
I forget his name now. But what you should find that you should counter program.
That's who I want to get.
Goldblum?
Yeah.
I told were you not on that interview? One of our interviews, I was like, why don't you just go hire Goldblum to do the thing? And he was like, I don't want to pick a fight. Forget who that was now, but you should. It's like boxing, like when like they try to counter program each other, and you should think about it. Like, you're like, who are they going to have? And if they have Clarkson, then maybe you get Bon Jovi or something. Like whoever the opposite would be.
Miley Cyrus.
Opposite. I was thinking the opposite. The counter program and get the other folks that wouldn't be interested.
Yeah. Might have to go beyond Bon Jovi. There might be more overlap than you expect there. Might have to go Metallica.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a really good. There may be more than 100 though. I have a feeling that they're.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's like trying to call U2. Excuse me. What's the appearance fee for U2? All right. Well, do you have anything else?
No. This is entertaining.
All right. Cool. Well.
For us, at least.
That's the pod.